will now come to order. I would ask if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you again. Welcome, everyone. We'll start. Will she? Yeah.
She may not have heard you.
Scott, if you would proceed with certification of quorum.
Yes, ma'am. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Here.
Henrico County, Mr. Cooper. Vice Chair Rogish.
Here.
Mr. Schmidt. Charles City County, Mr. Atkins.
Ryan
Mr. Pat.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. New Kent County, Mr. Moyer.
Here.
Ms. Stewart. Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
Here.
Mr. Holland. Ms. Schneider.
Here.
Dr. Miller. Goochland County, Mr. Lyle.
Here.
Mr. Vaughters. Hanover County, Mr. Davis. Ms. Pritchard. Mr. Hudson. Powhatan County, Mr. Kinney. Ms. Morissette. Mr. McClung. Mr. Powers. City of Richmond, Mr. Breton. Ms. Jordan.
Here.
Chair Newbill.
Here.
Ms. Robertson. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. GRTC, Ms. Torres.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Adams. RMTA, Ms. Dean.
Here.
VDOT, Mr. Totten.
Here.
Mr. Riblet.
Here.
CTAC, Mr. Bunn. Mr. Martin. Virginia Department of Aviation, Mr. Harrington. Mr. Smiley. DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Here.
Mr. Hudson. FTA, Mr. Koenig. Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Rucker. Ride Finders, Ms. Ruffin.
Here.
Mr. O'Keefe. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Knopf. Members, I have approved requests from two members to participate remotely. Ms. Joy Taylor Dean, personal matters, specifically scheduling conflict that prevents her attendance in person. Mr. John Hodges, temporary or permanent disability or medical condition that prevents the member's physical attendance. I would like to now entertain a motion to confirm that the decision to approve the member's request was in conformance with the RRTPO policy for remote participation of members, and the voice of the remotely participating members can be heard by all persons at the primary meeting location.
Second. We tied.
Thank you. You talked already?
We tied.
Okay.
Tied one.
Okay, I appreciate that. Was it, yeah, okay. Yes, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Thank you. We'll proceed with the agenda, and the next item is consideration of any amendments to the meeting agenda. If you would take a look at the agenda and indicate if so desired any amendments that you'd like to see. Seeing none, we'll proceed with the agenda as delineated here. The next item will be open public comment period. Do we have any person or persons here who would like to provide comment? Seeing none, we'll proceed to the consent agenda and Ms. Schiff.
Thank you, Chair Gable. This morning we have 3 items on the consent agenda. They include meeting minutes from the TPO Policy Board on October 31st, the joint annual meeting on December 5th, and the work status report that was included in our Q2 billing reports to VDOT and DRPT. If there are no objections to including all 3 items on the consent agenda, they could be considered as a bundle for item.
Should approve the consent agenda. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. The next I have just a very brief set of updates. The first 3 items. The first is the Equity Working Group that held its first meeting on January 31st. The group members are volunteers from the RRTPO, the CTAC, and the Plan RVA Public Outreach and Engagement Committee. The current tasks of the work group include reviewing best practices and recommending adoption of a compensation policy for the TPO and commission to consider in preparation for FY 2026. Compensation may include various forms of recognition or remuneration for work group, advisory committee, focus group, and public meeting participants. The next item in terms of the task for the group is to review Plan RVA's Title VI plan and incorporate edits according to the agency's current practices and emerging guidance from federal partners. Both projects are scheduled to culminate with recommendations for consideration during the June RRTPO Policy Board and Commission meeting. The next item is Port of Virginia tour that we had to cancel. Planning is underway to reschedule the tour of the Richmond and Hampton Road Marine Terminals that was initially scheduled for this past October. Staff has identified September 4th as a potential date. Is working with each of the locality clerks to confirm member availability. Staff will then, based on availability determination, coordinate with the Port Authority staff to confirm the date. The last item for me is upcoming meeting schedules and programs. The May 1st Executive Committee and Policy Board meetings are during the Chamber RVA intercity visit to Greenville, South Carolina. So there's a conflict. And so today's agenda includes a request to cancel that Executive Committee meeting for that day and move the Policy Board meeting to the following Thursday, May 8th. And that's a part of the agenda for today for our consideration. With that, anything else?
Thank you, appreciate it. I think our staff are gonna help me with some handouts for a few items to be able to call your attention. The first is a guidance document that we've just printed. It's not hot off the presses, but it is released in the last week. And it's just the latest information that we have from the Department of Transportation, US Department of Transportation with regard to implementation of the recently issued executive orders. So this is an information item for you today. I think we'll have future conversations on future meetings about implications with work program and our efforts here at the regional level, but just wanted to be able to share this. Next, we wanted to ask for your help, and I know Sid's going to queue up the monitors for us and share with those who are remote. If you haven't seen this yet, we just wanted to call attention to our launched Engage website for this purpose is for the long range transportation plan update. And so For those of you who are active in the digital media space, we wanted to make sure that you have awareness of the location of an awesome toolkit that our team has put together where you can share information to invite your constituents to attend and participate in various virtual and in-person events associated with the long-range transportation plan. It's long time been a priority of this body to make sure that we get out into the communities and get as many voices from the public as possible in this process. And so we want to make sure that you have resources to connect with the folks that you know that care about transportation in the region. So I will send in two directions just a little flyer that can not only the QR code here can Mr. Lyle, here you go. Can not only send you either by using your smartphone or other camera device to this site, but you can also just go to engage.planrva.org/LRTP. Sid's clicked on the toolkit area here, which is really intended for people who want to help spread the word. But the variety of other tabs are actually where members of the public can go, including yourselves, to participate in the survey tools that we have, to be able to mark things on our interactive map, get information and get answers to frequently asked questions. So we invite you to take a look at this website and also definitely help us spread the word. The other thing that I will distribute is a flyer that we hope you will also help spread the word. We've got our regional symposium coming up on March 14th. If you sit on the commission board, that is the same, that is an event happening in lieu of the March commission meeting. So if you're able to attend on Friday, March 14th, we invite you to do so and ask that you help spread the word. Again, it's a 3-day-long event, taking the place of our planned RVA day that we've hosted in previous years. We're really pleased to be moving the event to the convention center. We've outgrown the space just in 2 years for that annual event. So we're really excited, and it's an opportunity for the public to weigh in not only on the LRTP in the morning sessions, but on our comprehensive economic development strategy in the afternoon. So the staff are doing a great job in getting the word out, but we also wanted to make sure that you all were aware and can help us spread the word there too. And I think with that, if it's okay, if there are no questions, we can move to item 7.
Yeah.
Okay. So as Dr. Newbill mentioned, we identified this conflict for some of you in potentially attending the intercity visit hosted by the Chamber to Greenville, South Carolina. And so in consultation with the chairs, the recommendation is to actually cancel the May 1st executive committee meeting for the TPO and to reschedule the policy board meeting from May 1st to May 8th. I'll make a special note, if you sit on the commission's executive committee, they will meet on May 8th at 8:30 a.m. And then the policy board for the TPO will meet at 9:30. So we've blended the two in an attempt to try to accommodate those of you that sit on both boards to not have an extra day. I hope that makes sense.
It's appreciated.
Different.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you sit on the commission board, you'll have a similar action on the agenda next week to cancel the full commission meeting in May, but keep the executive committee meeting. So it evens out, if that makes sense. So the requested action would be to cancel May 1st executive committee meeting and to move the policy board meeting from May 1st to May 8th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So we have no regional planning items on this meeting agenda, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We'll go next to regional funding, smart scale, Mr. Bushy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I just wanted to take a few minutes to give an update on Smart Scale Round 6. I want to caveat everything I'm about to say that this is based on the staff recommendation. So the way Smart Scale works, we submit our applications in the summer, they're scored and ranked through the fall, and then staff at OIP and VDOT and DRPT coordinate to develop a recommended list. And that recommended list is based strictly on the amount of funding that's available and the ranking of the projects. That list is provided to the CTB as an information item to help them inform them on their decision on what's ultimately selected. So there could be some changes from what we're seeing today before we get to the final set of projects. There's still some money left on the table that might go to another project that we haven't seen yet, but I want to just go over what we have, the information we have today. And with that caveat out of the way, the information looks really good for our region. So as some of you may already be aware, Smart Scale is really two separate programs. So there's a district grant program, which is a competition among the localities within the construction district. And so the district grant program had about $104 million available this round. There were 50 applications that were eligible with over $920 million requested. So a lot of needs out there and not enough money to cover all of it. There were 6 projects that were recommended by staff for funding, and of those, 5 of them were within the RRTPO and Plan RVA footprint. If you look at the map, the localities in blue are the ones within our region where projects were recommended for funding. The ones in purple didn't have a project recommended through the district grant program. And then the projects in gray are the balance, the counties in gray are the balance of the Richmond district, and the dark gray, which is the city of Petersburg, was the only one recommended for funding. So again, about 81% of the funding for the district grant was recommended for this part of the region, which is in line with historic experience. I just want to highlight this to get it out of the way because there are other projects, but I really want to focus mostly on the high priority projects program. So this is new this year and a lot of changes to the program. So you'll remember last year we talked a lot about all the changes that had been recommended that the CTB was reviewing. And basically the high priority projects program is more limited. So it is only certain corridors that are eligible, corridors of statewide significance in the regional network, so more limited areas that we can look at. Only certain types of improvements are eligible. So generally capacity improvements, new interchanges, fixed guideways, so like rail or dedicated bus lanes. So more limited project types. And the big change this year is the competition is purely statewide. So it used to be there was a first cut where there was money distributed at the district level, and then it went to a statewide competition with whatever was left over. This year we moved to a strictly statewide competition. So there's about $384 million available, 92 eligible applications, about $5 billion of requests there. So the process worked the same. All the projects were ranked statewide. Anything that had been recommended for funding in the district grant was pulled out, and then funding was assigned in order of rank. And from that, $381 million were allocated through that process, and of it, 44%, $167 million was recommended for projects within our footprint. And so again, looking at the map, it's the blue locality. They're showing sort of where the projects are located within the region. I want to highlight though that 2 of those applications were this board's applications. So there was I-95 and 10 in Chesterfield interchange project, and then there was also the part of the North-South BRT on Belt Boulevard in the city of Richmond. So 2 of those projects made it through the list. There were also 2 Plan RVA applications. I know it's the separate side of the house here, but 4 regional applications made it onto that short list, which is fantastic. Those are extra slots that we're able to support by being part of this regional body and working together. I think the other thing I want to highlight here is that you can see the cities of Hopewell and Petersburg are also on the list. It's all one big metro area, so even though it's a separate MPO, separate PDC, a lot of money coming to the region. I think it was about 2/3 of the overall money that was recommended through the high priority pot was within our region. So that's fantastic news. So overall, what that looks like, just over $1 billion was available. There were 270 applications with $8.1 billion requested. So definitely the request far exceeded the available funding. And of that money that was actually recommended for funding, 24% of it was within our footprint. So it's, 1 out of every $4 is recommended to come and stay here in the Richmond area, which is great. One other thing that I wanted to highlight here is that we put a lot of leverage onto these projects. This is something that the Secretary of Transportation, OIP staff definitely noticed, and they mentioned in the meeting that our region was very heavily leveraged on our applications, and a lot of the other regions weren't. And from the projects that were successful in the recommendations, there was $58 million of leverage, with 2/3 of that coming through the CBTA regional pot, but another 14% coming from this board through the funding that the RRTPO allocates with the RSTP and CMAQ programs. So over 80% of that leverage was coming from the regional bodies. And the return on that leverage was a 4 to 1. So for every dollar that we were putting in on leverage, assuming things hold up, we'll get $4 back in funding through the Smart Scale program. So it's a fantastic return on the investment for the region. So I think this really speaks to how much we've been able to cooperate and put together the leveraging plan for a region and also make our projects as successful as possible. So that's all I had to share right now. As I mentioned, and I'm gonna just close with the caveat again, this is all preliminary. There may be some changes over the next few months, but please feel free to talk with your staff and talk to your CTV member if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to raise. So thank you.
Yes, questions?
Thank you
Councilmember-
so much,
Sorry, yes.
Chair Newell. Would you have a list of the scoring and which ones are in here?
Yes, we can share that out after the meeting for everyone. So it's on the Smart Scale website, but we can share a link for everyone.
Thank you.
Any other, yes, Mr. Lyon?
You said if nothing else changes, who are the players that would create something to change?
So as I mentioned, it's up to the CTV to make the decision ultimately. So part of the discussion is, as I mentioned, there's money left on the table. So there could be additional projects that get funded. So going back here on the district grant program, there was $104 million available, 82 million through the staff recommendation process. And basically the way that works, they work their way down the ranked list. If they can't fund the next project fully, they stop. And so whatever money's left over could be put on a project that scored lower, but it had a lower cost, so it would be fully funded then. So that's part of the process. And the other part is really sometimes the priorities that come through this process don't really match with what the locality it wants to see. So it might not be the locality's priority for projects, or the timing might be off. So there's occasions where localities give up projects as well, and then that frees up money for something else to be selected. So it's a lot of discussions. A lot of your planning and engineering staff will be talking with the CTV, with VDOT, DRPT on this discussion over the next few months.
Alright, so if it's currently on the list, it's not a slam dunk, but pretty well sure it's not gonna be taken off. Is that correct?
I would defer to VDOT on that probably, but I think that's a pretty safe assumption. In general, those projects, we see some changes between the staff recommendation and the final consensus. But historically, it hasn't been a huge shift. It hasn't been all the projects coming off or anything like that.
I hate to be provincial, I'm not worried about all of them. A couple of Gooseland I'd like to know that aren't coming off.
Mr. Moore,
Dr. Newell, you mentioned that there was the amount of leverage. How many of the staff recommended projects had leverage?
I don't know about the entirety of the state, but out of the ones that we had on our
Yes.
list, out of the 11, 10 of them had leverage on them.
Okay.
other questions? Comments?
That's very good.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. We'll go on to the Smart Scale.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So the next item that I have for you is our 2025.
I'm
state
sorry,
target.
yes, the next one, yeah. We just did that one.
So the safety target setting is an annual process here at the policy board. Basically, to explain it briefly, the federal government's process for road funding is tied to performance. So we're supposed to plan towards certain performance targets and then put funding toward those to help drive success in meeting those targets. And one of the areas that we're required to measure is safety, which is measured in the number of people killed and seriously injured on our roadways. And so the process essentially is that the state sets the target each year, back in the summer, I believe it's August. And then from August, for the next 180 days, the MPOs have a chance to review the targets and decide whether they want to follow along with the state's process or set our own process for how we're going to set targets. The other thing to consider in all of this is that it is 5-year rolling averages, so it's hard to make any drastic changes in any given year. So you've got 4 years of data basically baked in before you're starting. So that's sort of out of the way. There's 5 areas that we set the targets. So it's the number of people that are killed on our roadways, again, it's the average. The number of people who are killed for every 100 million vehicle miles traveled. The number of people seriously injured, the rate with 100 million miles vehicle miles traveled. And then specifically looking at people who are killed or seriously injured outside of a vehicle. So non-motorized, people walking, biking, rolling, using our streetways, streets and roads, and being sort of the most vulnerable road users. So we have worked with TAC, and there's a whole bunch of extra data in your agenda packets if you want to look through all of sort of the historic data and where we are. But We've worked with the TAC to develop recommended targets for you for each of those areas for the year. And what we really started at was the numbers of people killed and seriously injured and sort of backed up from there into the rates. So this chart that you see on here, each of the blue dots is the total number of people killed in a given year, with the orange being that rolling average over time. And you can see from about 2016 on, that has essentially just been an upward trajectory. And that is a national trend. It's something that everyone is working on, and I think I know several of your localities have been working on safety plans to try and get projects on the ground to make a difference and stop this upward trajectory. So where we're at today, and this is through 2022 data, there's a bit of a lag in reporting, but is 116 people are killed each year on our roadways. Just for some context, I mean, that's the equivalent of 2 plane crashes from what we just saw in DC. So, you know, it's an unfortunate comparison, but the numbers are just drastic. So what we try to do is figure out how to best change that trajectory and bring it back down. What you can see, there's the shaded orange area, sort of to the right of the chart. That's basically where it looks like we're going based on the preliminary data for 2023 and 2024. So it doesn't look like there's been any real change to where we're headed. Last year, this board took action and we very aggressively set a target of 107. We were saying we wanted to hold even with where we were in 2021. And it doesn't look like we're going to hit that target. But what the TAC and staff are recommending is that we keep the target. So even in the face of the upward trajectory right now, we drew a hard line in the sand and said 107 is the number we want to bend back toward. And that's the number that we're recommending. I put on here for informational purposes, but if we were to follow the state, what we would do would be bumping it up to 116. And I think there needs to be a recognition here. 107 is very much aspirational. Given the data that we are already seeing, there's not really a chance that we're going to hit that number. But I think the purpose and what TAC and staff are looking at is that we have to draw the hard target. We have to draw a line somewhere to be able to start really focusing and putting more of our energy into making a difference on these curves. So that's the first one, and I'm happy to take questions now, or I can save them all for the end, Madam Chair.
Let me go, Mr. Lyles, you have a question or comment or?
One of my comments, and this is my second, I'm entering my second year here on the RRTPO, but last year I was like, oh, so we're hoping, or we're targeting 107 people to die. And why isn't it 0? Why wouldn't we set a standard that we don't want anybody to die? And as I understand it, that could penalize us, because if we miss our bogey by a significant delta, we're like, you're 107% off your target of 0. So are we penalized for wanting no one to die on the roads?
Sure, I think maybe I can back up and kind of explain why we're setting 107 is our recommendation, but I think the short answer is the state, there are definite consequences if the state sets a target and doesn't meet it. There's additional spending, additional planning work that has to go towards safety.
Yes.
For the MPOs, it's not as direct. It's more of it comes up as part of our review process every 4 years, but it's really more of a how realistic are we setting targets if we're completely missing, right? The 107 number is really what we're looking at as a hybrid approach. We see the numbers are going up. We know that the actual rate is probably going to be higher, but we do recognize that 0 is the vision that we all share, that nobody should die on roadways, right? And so the idea is if we set that middle ground of holding firm with where we were just in 2021, a couple years ago, we're saying we need to start bringing it back down. And once we hit that 107, then we lower the target again and keep that downward trajectory going. So this is a sort of middle ground approach. We're trying to say we recognize the data is heading the wrong direction, but we still think 0 is the real target in the vision that we have.
Madam Chair. So does this mandate or highly encourage us to put more money towards safety focused projects because we're not hitting the 107, or does this have an impact on how we would fund projects that would be more safety focused as opposed to congestion focused or economic development focused?
Sure, so I think directly, no. I mean, it is a guide for this board to make those decisions. So the process that we have set up right now, safety is the highest rated factor in how we're prioritizing projects for our long-range planning and also for how we're scoring and evaluating projects. As Martha was just mentioning, we're in the middle of the next LRTP. And the one thing we've heard very clearly from the advisory committee that's guiding that right now is that safety is the #1 priority. So I think that the recognition is there and we're working toward it. But there's nothing binding us to say we're only gonna pick safety projects as opposed to other project types from this.
Thank you, man.
No, I withdraw.
Okay,
Madam Chair.
yes, Mr. Carroll.
I think, I understand where he's coming from with the number. The question I have actually is, I understand how we target, specific locations, but I think it would be good for anybody in the community who's watching to understand what this organization actually does to actually, try and address some of these issues and how we analyze the data. For example, at least locally in Chesterfield County, if we look at a jurisdiction and we've had multiple fatalities at a particular location, then we look at what actually caused those fatalities to determine whether or not it's actually a traffic issue or if it's something else. And so, I think diving into that, a little bit of an explanation for the community to understand how we can actually make a difference in this. I mean, locally, we have to look at those things to say, we need more traffic officers working this intersection because people aren't paying attention or there's a low shoulder on the road here that's created a problem and people are running off and it's creating this. So what do we actually do? What can you tell the public about how we analyze this information and how we actually tie it in with all this?
Sure, so I think I'll start regionally, and a few years ago in 2022, this board approved a regional safety plan. So in that safety plan, what we did was we mapped out all of the fatal and serious injury crashes across the region. And we looked at which roadways these were occurring on. And from that, we were able to develop what's called a high injury network. So these are the roadways that are disproportionately contributing to the number of people who are dying and being seriously injured on our roads. So from that network, we're then able to look at the extra information of what you were talking about, Mr. Carroll, in terms of what was contributing to those crashes. Is it the design of the roadway? Was it the time of day? What are the various factors that are leading into that? And that helps us to prioritize where we should invest. So we know where the problem is, we know what are the drivers of it, and that helps us to prioritize investment. So each of our largest localities, so Richmond, Chesterfield, and Henrico, have received grants through the Safe Streets for All program to refine that study and actually come up with recommended actions on what to do. So that includes things like improving signage. It also includes adding pedestrian crossings. It could include signal and intersection improvements. There's a whole bunch of different projects that come out of it. It depends on what the issue is that's driving it, to your point. There's also the other elements of education and enforcement that we talk about. So making sure that there is some awareness of what people should be doing as drivers, as pedestrians, as cyclists on the roadway, and making sure that people are following the rules and behaving safely. I think one of the great programs that we've seen, and Chesterfield is rolling it out now too, is the school speed cameras in the city of Richmond. So controlling speed is the #1 driver of why people are killed or seriously injured. So controlling speed by putting those speed cameras is slowing people down, especially where we have the most vulnerable road users, children trying to cross the street. So I think that there's a lot of efforts going on, and it's all through a data-driven process. So by setting the targets, it's helping us to look back at the data and make sure we're still targeting the right areas and focusing on the right things.
Madam Chair, follow.
Yes.
Thank you for the explanation. I think, we come in and we get these documents and have great data and everything in it, but the community or anybody who may be watching outside has no clue what's in this, what we're actually looking at and why we make the decisions that we did. I mean, for example, even roundabouts, right? So roundabouts, I get complaints about roundabouts all the time. And Chesterfield County has the second largest road network in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're putting roundabouts everywhere. But they work, they slow people down, which is the whole thing. So I appreciate you giving a little more information to the community at large. Because really, I think the goal, as Mr. Lyle said, is to have zero. I don't know that we'll ever achieve that, but certainly we're trying to do the best we can with spending taxpayer dollars to address the issues where they're prioritized, because again, that's what we're here for.
You mentioned that the first part of that was from statistics back in 2022. When would be the next time that would change?
Yes, sir. So the local plans that have been undertaken have updated that data, but our plan is to update the regional plan. I think next year would be the next cycle. So then it would be just that 2020 year would be the overlap in the data that we have. So trying to make sure that that stays fresh with the most current information that we have. I think, I haven't looked at all the localities, but I just pulled Ashland for some research that I was looking at recently. And the high injury network is still the high injury network. In the town of Ashland, the 3 roadways that we had designated are still responsible for 3/4 of the serious injuries and 100% of the fatalities. I mean, it's still, the trends don't change that much without intervention. So I think that's something that we'll look at and make sure that we update, but the expectation is it would largely stay the same.
One of the things when we look at these projects, that in the last group that we are looking at that are recommended, and one of the things we forget about, and we know it was forgotten with I-64, is the extra monies that needs to be spent by jurisdictions for those projects going on. We have 12 car back pileups. We have not enough state police. Not enough monies for our own deputies and for fire rescue that should have been put into the whole total pot. We're not sure how that money can be recouped, or in the future planned for. Because that was the reason why I asked for the difference. Well, when will the next one come out? It's because our lane R64 will show up now versus any other section of 64.
I think we can look into that and try and provide some more information, but I think in terms of the interstates, generally, we don't look at interstates for this, the high injury network mapping.
Well, you don't have to, because we got a number of side roads that are now very busy.
Yes, sir, but in general, we're focusing on the more local streets because statistically, interstates are the safest way to travel, right? In terms of roadway networks, because interstates have controlled access, there's limited conflict, it's as safe as a road can be designed. So we make improvements to make them safer, but on the whole, there's less going on compared to driving next to driveways and businesses and people darting out. Like, there's so much extra information that you have to process when you're driving in a more congested area off of those interstates. And so that's why we don't tend to look at those as part of the high injury network, but we could definitely pull the information to share with you on that.
Thank you.
Miles, I don't want to get you real from the presentation, but do you plan to talk about the current discussions with the TAC? Okay.
Sure, I can mention that now. So part of the work plan for this year was to look at our Vision Zero work group that we had established a few years ago and see if we needed to bring that work group back, or if there was another way for us to focus on safety at this body. So what we are having next week, after the TAC reviewed these targets, they asked for a discussion on what else can we be doing at the regional level on safety. So next week at the TAC meeting, we'll be discussing, and I encourage anyone who has a chance to tune in or watch the recording to take a look. But talking about other ideas on how best we can support you. So to your questions, Mr. Moyer, part of that could be us conducting road safety audits. So looking at those high injury network corridors and helping to identify what the issues are. Some of that could be us working on a regional education campaign where we're sharing the same messaging broadly throughout the entire region. So it's not on each locality to try and get the message across. I think there's quite a few other ideas that we have, and hopefully we'll get a lot of other ideas from the TAC members, but really looking for opportunities that we can support you to bring these numbers back down.
Madam Chair, just one final question, just to be clear though, we set a target at 107 and we get to 125, we're not going to be penalized for that.
That's correct. There's no direct penalty to the NPO.
Any other questions and or comments? If not, might I have a motion?
Oh, yeah, I've got a couple more slides.
Oh, yeah, more. I think I'm still stuck in the SMART scale, and I'm still just so encouraged by the funding potential that I'm still stuck here, so, yeah, okay. We'll come
So
forward.
this one is the chart showing people that are seriously injured. So as you can see in the late 2000s into the early 2010s, we were making pretty good progress on reducing the number of people seriously injured. but it's largely slowed down over the past decade. The good and encouraging news here is that we are making progress, and it looks like we are gonna hit our targets that we set. So last year we set a target of 872, and we are down to 871 as of 2023. And it looks like we'll probably be down around 855 or so for 2024. So making progress. So what the recommendation from TAC and staff here is to set a target at 843, which would be basically continuing that progression, continuing the near-term trend of reducing the number of people who are seriously injured. And then finally, this is the number of people who are killed or seriously injured while outside of a vehicle, so walking, biking, non-motorized. You can see here that the trend has basically been flat for an extended time. The unfortunate reality, though, is that we're starting to see an increase. I think we've all heard about it and probably talked about it at our local board meetings. I know it's definitely in the news of the number of pedestrians that are being hit and injured and killed. So this is a major emphasis here. The good news is that in 2022, the numbers dropped ever so slightly to 109. And so we're recommending following along with the state and holding that 109. We were at 110. And again, not likely to hit the target based on the trends that we're seeing, but setting that new lower limit of that's what we want to get back to. And so putting it all together, these are the proposed targets on the right-hand side. So we're recommending 107 people killed, 1.003 people killed per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, serious injuries of 843, serious injuries per 100 million vehicle miles traveled 7.875, and the killed and seriously injured non-motorized at 109. The one thing I do want to add here is the vehicle miles traveled is based on the state's assumption of a 2.4% annual growth in vehicle miles traveled. So we just followed along with that. We didn't have any data to suggest another number. So that's the recommendation. TAC recommends approval of those safety targets. There's a draft resolution in your packet on page 44. If the board approves those targets, we will submit them along with sort of the calculation worksheets that were required to VDOT to be provided to federal highways upon request. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Are there any other? Yes, Ms. Snyder.
What is the definition of seriously injured?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that go into serious injuries, but in general, these are more of they're taken to the hospital to severe breaks, major burns, people that are in coma leaving the scene of the crash. So it's there's a whole list of sort of the things that qualify, but basically it's broken down to serious injuries, and then there's like more moderate injuries, and then there's like potential injuries where somebody says something hurts, but there's no obvious signs of anything. So that there's kind of a categorization in there.
Okay. I was just wondering if it was more about the better medical care of the person getting better service and not being terminally or a serious injury later on if they were getting it. So that's
and I'm glad you raised that point, that there is a 30-day window. So after a crash, if someone dies within 30 days, that would then be changed over from the serious injury to a fatality. So there's a window that crashes can be sort of adjusted to reflect the outcome.
Any other?
Well, I mean, Ms. Schneider's questioning has me thinking, do they ever upgrade from the initial accident site? Doesn't seem to be, but here I say a personal injury attorney becomes involved and all of a sudden becomes an extremely serious injury. Does it ever migrate upwards or?
So they do change, but it's I think one of the things in the data that we're reporting to you is there's a reporting lag to make sure that we're adjusting for that information, which is kind of why I was mentioning it's 2022 and 2023 data that we're setting targets off of. So that reporting lag gives us time to finalize where things are and make sure that we're giving you the best information.
Right, thank you.
So sorry, just one. Is anyone else noticed, and again, I don't, maybe this is, you were talking about the non-vehicle. So are any other localities having issues or finding things that we might have to find some kind of ordinance to control the motorized bikes? I mean, some of these they go really fast. I mean, even on local streets, I mean, they're kind of dangerous if you ask me, and there's kids riding them with no helmets on.
Great.
I think wasn't that a motorized unicycle or the person was killed on Route 1? I mean, I just.
Right.
I don't know.
Motorized unicycle, yep,
I
that was a
just-
new one.
I just don't know that I think that's something that we might need to look at statewide maybe, but I don't know. I just think it's something that's causing more issues, so.
Yeah, we're happy to take a look and see if there's any information, anybody else's research on that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just to that point, I would say that the current rules for bicycles apply to them just like they would any other bicycle that's on the road. Unfortunately, people ride bicycles and don't pay attention to the actual laws. I see people on bikes blow through stop signs, or blow through red lights because they're on a bike and they think they don't have to pay attention to traffic signals. With an educational program of reminding people that, you know, even though you're on a bike, you still have to follow the rules, I think would help tremendously.
Any other questions and or comments? I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the 2025 targets.
So moved.
Second.
And do we need Ms. Scott to do a voice? Okay, we'll just,
vote is fine.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bushney. Sorry, we're stuck at the smart scale. Exciting possibilities about funding. We'll proceed with the agency and committee reports and so Deepak, Mr. Tucker.
Good morning, not to pile on the smart scale, but I do need to start by just with a moment of thanks for all of the staff in the locality and here at you know, just if you look at the smart scale results for that draft scenario, it's a pretty remarkable example of partnership and collaboration. Well, we had a handful of applications that were pulled out during the process. By and large, a large preponderance of the submitted applications were scored, which is a pretty remarkable feat. Again, the Richmond district that's, I believe, in just about every round of smart scale had the most applications from across the state. We certainly look forward to seeing that program and that process finalized through the spring. The question was asked earlier about decision-making. Mr. Davis, our CTB member, is the largest driver in that. I'll give you two observations. One, Mr. Davis is a great guy to have a conversation with for you to advocate. And then the second thing I'll share with you is please make sure you avail yourself of the opportunity to advocate for your projects at the spring 6-year plan public hearing. We had a great example of that the last round of smart scale, where a locality that is a member of this group advocated very strongly for their project and it was rewarded with funding. So please tell your story. Nobody's going to tell the story of your project better than you. I certainly would encourage you to go back 2 years ago and look at the transcript to see how that was done. There's a great example that should help you as you are considering advocacy for your projects. A couple other things to make you aware of. We are a couple of construction projects of note. The CTB at their last meeting took action to award what's affectionately known as Segment B of the I-64 gap widening project. For those of you who may not be familiar, between mile marker 205 and mile marker 234 in James City County, we have a widening project that consists of 3 segments. The third segment, Segment B, which is the segment in the middle through Mr. Moyer's neighborhood, was awarded. So now all 3 segments have been awarded. 2 of them are under active prosecution of construction now. The third will start later this year, physically on the ground. Keep your eyes and ears open as you drive down there. Segment A on the western part of Kent County will be completed in the summer of 2027. Segment C in James City County will be completed in 2028. And then segment B in the middle will be completed in 2029. As I often remind folks, if you're down in that neighborhood, it is a long, active construction zone. Please slow down. Please give plenty of space to your neighbors as they're navigating down the roadway. Please take the opportunity to put your phone down and focus on the roads. As Mr. Moyer reminds me, we do have challenges in managing incidents, and we have a high frequency of impactful incidents down on that active construction project. So please encourage your folks to do their part on that. Also want to make you aware of the Fall Line Trail. We have 2 active segments. Design, what we call Design Build 1, which is in the northern end of the district, and beginning at Mr. Hodges neighborhood, and then working through Hanover County and across the Chickahominy. We expect that project to be done in early summer this year. That is progressing well. We are working our way through the procurement for Design Build 2 down in Mr. Carroll's neighborhood, beginning at Petersburg and working our way north. So we hope to be able to award that to a successful offerer this summer. Couple other last notes. We are working our way through the Mayo Bridge replacement project right out the front door here. We are actively engaged working through the final stages of alignment and typical section, which will lead us to then beginning the environmental process for that project. We are in heavy coordination with the city parks and Department of Public Works as we're working our way through that. Please stay tuned for more on that project as we go forward. Out in Short Pump, please know that we do have public comment period under the way for the NEPA work that's ongoing. That public review is February 3rd through February 20th. So please be aware of that. We are working our way through the Poway Parkway Phase 2 down in Mr. Carroll's neighborhood on the NEPA process. So please stay tuned for future updates down the road. Mr. Hodges, I hope you're feeling well. Miss you sitting around the table. And with that, I'll conclude.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Todd. Do we have a date yet in terms of the spring, the spring date that we're able to go and advocate?
We do not. We don't.
Okay.
It hasn't been said yet, but I'd say traditionally, if you think through the process of smart scale, typically we have the public hearings, one in each district across the state, and that's in the April-May neighborhood.
Okay.
And then the CTB would take their final action and present their final project list at their June board. So I'd say when we get together in March, we'll probably have a date at least tentatively established at that point.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. DRPT. I'm sorry, Mr.
Thank you, Chair Newell. Do the localities need to try and advocate along the lines of this order, or is the smart scale scoring going to change at all?
So I don't know that the actions by that order will impact. We don't know at this point. We really don't know. Certainly, we'll be reactive if and when we get any guidance or direction. We haven't received any indication that there's anything coming. But again, so I don't have a great answer for you, okay, other than we are being responsive when we get direction.
Okay, so it says in here, there needs to be a report no later than 6 months after the effect of this order, but doesn't have a date on it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering.
I'll let Martha.
Yeah, thank you.
We were conferring about that. I have the date that we discovered the memo on the internet, but it is not dated, which is confusing.
Maybe just.
I will say that our State Association of MPOs has a meeting scheduled for February 24th. And I believe that the intention is to invite our colleagues from Federal Highway Administration to attend, probably with the purpose of that meeting to be able to gather questions so that they can investigate the answers to those questions. The word that I heard in the last week from our representatives from Federal Highway, and Mr. Rucker did send his regrets today. He is ill with the flu. But the word that we have heard yet is that they, just like Mr. Totten, are awaiting information and guidance and are working to try to push out as much as they can as soon as it's available. But this is what we have thus far. Thank you. And I have been in contact with Maggie Anderson as well and understanding the city's intergovernmental work.
Thank you.
Okay. The next report, DRPT.
Thank you so much. So a couple of items for the board today. First, to highlight our most recent marketing campaign. We are calling it our DRPT Connects Businesses, aiming at educating our Virginia employers on the advantages of offering community benefits. Right next to Ride Finders while I talk about this, as well as hybrid work plans. So we provide some marketing resources to be able to promote and encourage our employers to implement these programs. So there's promotions about our commuter assistance programs, commuter benefits, as well as hybrid work plans. And so that's on our Connecting VA website, which I'll have linked in the agency update. As Mr. Totten mentioned, we at DRPT are going to begin our work on our 6-year improvement program as well. I believe the intent is that last year we had done our own DRPT focused spring public hearing, because we do have a separate 6-year improvement program. I believe the intent is to do that as well as accompanying the spring public meetings with VDOT. So we have not set that date as well, but hopefully by next month we'll have that for you all. A couple other items, just kind of more of like a kudos and a highlight. So for those of you who remember that we operate the Virginia Breeze Intercity Bus Service, I like to highlight that we set our ridership record as of last month or so. So we've broken our ridership record for 2024. It's the best year we've had in the 7-year history for this service. If you don't remember, we also run the Capital Connector that connects through Richmond, as well as 3 other routes. And we are currently working for the end of this year to launch the Tidewater Current, which is our east-west connector. But I do like to highlight that we had a record break for Virginia Breeze. And then the last item, which is not necessarily quite related to Richmond, but I do find it of value. So DRPT has partnered with the North Carolina DOT to launch a new intercity bus service that will be connecting everywhere from Danville, Virginia, and it'll connect people down through to Winston-Salem via Greensville. We run our Piedmont connector, if I remember the title correctly, that connects with Danville. But now there is some new intercity bus service. NCDOT is paying for that service that's coming through always to Danville. It'll be a 1-year pilot, but I do find that it's good to just highlight some new services that might be connecting with the Commonwealth. And that is all I have for my update.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey. Any questions, comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Orr.
I'm gonna sound old when I say this, but back in the day, James River bus lines used to actually offer service into Richmond, and it would go to Haynesville, Sandy Hook, Houston Courthouse. My ears kind of pinged when you said that there's similar type of services being looked at going down to North Carolina. Is there any even whispering or concepting that reinstituting something that would take maybe the western counties and provide bus service into the city on a scheduled or program basis and not just ad hoc along those lines?
Well, it would take a little bit of my memory to remember the James River transportation and the service area. For us with the Virginia Breeze Intercity, it's meant to be kind of more of the longer commuter routes, and they have to focus on rural areas in particular that would connect to Richmond. Now, without knowing the details of what that would look like, it would be a combination of either you talk with us or perhaps with GRTC in terms of what their coverage is that they provide connections with. But it just depends on the frequency that you're looking at. For the intercity bus lines, those are more of those long distance. So those could be hours rather than maybe just smaller trips. And so that's just depending on what you're thinking with the frequency.
You're pushing an hour to get from Haynesville into the city proper, so.
Right.
But we'll chat afterwards if that's all right, but thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Torres, GRTC.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
A couple updates. First, we have a couple of safety and security initiatives that we have started. The first one highlighting kind of the more safety seat theme. We have been working with the City of Richmond, the OETM office on their lighter, quicker, cheaper initiatives, and are doing a pilot for a bus platform, which just went through the Planning Commission. And that is going to be on Mechanicsville Turnpike. So it's a traffic calming initiative that also is safety related to passengers getting on and off the bus. So it'll sit it sits either in the through lane or in like a parking lane, and it's like a bump out, but it is kind of a prefab. And it allows individuals to be on that and traffic calming to go around it, kind of like the roundabout idea. So that'll be our first one. We'll see how it goes, but within the city of Richmond, the at least concept has been approved. More towards security, we have hired we're calling safety ambassadors as well as security officers within GRTC. They'll have a presence at our transfer station and then some of our more dense routes throughout the region for the security, and the ambassadors will be more or less on all of our routes, just to give more of a presence of just security within our actual routes. We have had some instances at our transfer station. And then the safety ambassadors will be more of kind of outreach, customer service, but also just have more of a security presence on all of them. We also have our North-South BRT study is continuing. Very excited about the smart scale recommendation. Every portion that gets funded goes towards that more or less $300 million mark that we'll eventually be looking at. We were looking at having our next public meeting for that in March, as well as the Western BRT that will potentially go down to Parham Road. That study is also underway, a kind of a more faster timeline in the North-South BRT, but also public meetings around March and April for that as well. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. Questions? Thank you. Ms. Joy Dean, I'm not sure if you are able to.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay.
Excellent. Good morning. I just wanted to share, I really enjoyed the engaging conversation about safety. I currently serve as the first vice president of the International Tunnels, Turnpikes and Bridges Association, which is an international association for tolling agencies. And we have engaged in, for the last year, a global safety campaign, and it's primarily social media focused. And so hopefully we can work with you all on that. The Global Safety Week is in June. And so I will bring more information forth on that. And also regard to safety, we also have to take into consideration human behavior. For the first time in a number of years, we had a fatality on the Downtown Expressway a few months ago. And what we found is that, it was a driver who was asleep at the wheel and ran straight into the plaza. We've also found that our toll collectors have had a significant uptick in incidents with drivers not being kind to them. And so I think we also have to take that into consideration when we think about safety. So that's all I have for today.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Ms. Joy Dean? Thank you. Mr. Parsons, CBTA, anything? Okay. And there is document page 45 with the reference. Ms. Schibel.
Thank you. I just will go back to my bad response, Ms. Jordan, to your question. I think just globally speaking, we're trying to understand the impacts of, as an agency, Plan RDA is 80% federally funded. And so we're trying to understand the programmatic impacts of changes to existing contracts. We have been notified in some instances, some awards, but not yet contracted grants are put on hold. From the guidance that I've seen, it looks like February 18th is the date that we might see more information coming out. So I just wanted to sort of maybe clarify a little bit. While that memo that we have distributed today doesn't have the date on it with the timeline, it appears that many of the communication points that are companion to this were issued on January 29th. And there were 10-day windows that allow for internal review of existing programs and that analysis to occur relative to the executive orders, and then issuance of that information. And then the 18th appears to be a date before which I wouldn't expect to get any information. And I don't know how long after the 18th we will get that. We've attempted as a staff at Plan RBA to remain in close contact with our agencies. I've got staff today in a statewide meeting with our coastal zone management program to understand what the implications are from funding that are coming through NOAA. We've been in contact with our partners at FEMA and the Department of Emergency Management, and of course with Federal Highway and our partners at VDOT and DRPT. So we're trying to stay on top of the information. It's just that there's not a lot available right now. But if you were looking for kind of a sense of a timeline, it looks like it's gonna be mid-February before we would expect to really have anything concrete. And then I'll just note from an administrative perspective, I want to recognize Lauren Shepard, who's our new Chief Finance and Administration Officer. She and the entire finance team, as well as our program leads, have been working with me to understand in the immediate impacts of the communications and the thread. Eric and I have been in contact about the previous notice about pause of funding. And so we've been looking at our internal just financial and fiscal management processes to understand what our exposure is, but also just to understand what we need to do as quickly as possible to incorporate any programmatic changes. So we'll keep you up to date. And certainly I think we will potentially be coming back. I have asked the question if our Unified Planning Work Program for the MPO needs to be amended. We don't know. But we're asking the questions and hopefully we'll get guidance as soon as possible. My hope is that as has been indicated in some of the notices of funding availability, my hope is that some grace will be given for us to be able to have time to move through the policy making process here at the regional and local level. And not be held responsible for complying with the new directives back to January 16th. I think in some cases we that will not have been possible because we can't go back in time. We're trying to sort of monitor and understand that situation really carefully to be able to understand how to bring information back to you all and make the best decisions with what we know. But that's the best I can tell you as far as that goes right now. And I suspect that next week's commission meeting will have a similar, hopefully with a little bit more information, but a similar update, but also in talking with Dr. McGraw, I think the hope is that we can make space on that agenda for us to hear from you all about what you're hearing from your local government staff and how, if at all, you need to create, any kind of programmatic change response, that kind of a thing. So I think if you are in attendance at that meeting, I think that there will be an invitation from Dr. McGraw to do a little bit of information sharing locality to locality on that front.
This is February 18th meeting or sorry, which
I'm
meeting
sorry,
is that?
February 18th is a date that I've just
Right,
noticed.
sorry,
in
which
some of
meeting
the-
are you talking about?
The commission next meets on February 13th, next
thank you.
Thursday, yeah. Yeah, sorry, I threw out a lot of dates there.
That's okay.
Thank you.
That's all.
Members, are there any further?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Hodges.
thank you. This question for Ms. Schickel. In the November CVTA meeting, there was a presentation of the Fall Line Trail Management, a resource guide. And in that meeting, there was a discussion of the difference between maintenance, which each locality is working with VDOT on, and management, which potentially could be a nonprofit organization like Capital Trails for the Fall Line Trail. And the CVTA concluded that they did not have any authority to make a decision, that the matter should be referred to Plan RVA or RRTPO. And my question is, what is the status? Is that something that will be added to our agenda, or will it go to Plan RVA?
I think that our legal counsel is saying we don't know.
That's the legal analysis.
Then we don't,
I think that's an open question right now is what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think the issue of authority is the same for both the commission and the TPO. From the commission perspective, I would say very clearly we act at the request and direction of the member jurisdictions. And so if the member jurisdictions wanted Plan RVA to take a role in something like that, it would need to be recommended and requested in that way. I think either of the agendas could include a discussion, but for either body to take action, there would need to be an authority to do so determined. So I can confer with the two chairs and figure out if if there's an appetite, but that's kind of a discussion, and perhaps the chair of the CBTA would wanna confer with them as well.
Okay.
I appreciate, or I understand the answer. We have a section of the Fall Line Trail that has been built and is in operation, and issues come up about promoting the Fall Line Trail, things that an organization could deal with. It would seem that I would hope that either Plan RVA or RRTPO would be willing to consider this issue and help coordinate it. I think it is a appropriate regional role, but I appreciate the
I will
patience.
confer with our local government administrators.
Great.
I'll commit to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Shipley.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges, and we'll have a follow-up.
Yeah.
Based on all this conversation. Any other comments, members?
No, Chair, just to that point, I think the issue that we gotta figure out is that there are sections of the Fall Line Trail that are owned by Enrico, that are owned by Richmond, and the other ones are gonna be owned and operated or maintained by VDOT. And so it's, we gotta, all those jurisdictions need to get together and come to an agreement on how to do this before anybody else can even think about saying, I'm gonna run it for you. So we just gotta get our heads together on that. And once we do that, then we'll be in a better position to make a decision, I think.
And I'll certainly ask Martha to be helpful in having us get to the table for those discussions to representatives. So we can come back with some proposed resolution. Thank you. With that, we've concluded the agenda for today. I thank everyone for your attendance. The meeting now stands adjourned.
Thank you.